All right, welcome to Redirect, Immigration Law and Perspectives, a weekly dive into the world of immigration law and its human consequences. I'm here with Matthew Archambault.
That's right. Here I am. I'm right here.
There he is, stepping all over the intro this week.
That's what I do.
Matthew doesn't like the intro. He says it's too long, so he's here to police me.
Yeah.
He's like Chad Wolf. He's been sent in.
No, you're Chad Wolf. I know. No, you're the graffiti artist. You're Chad Wolf. Put an end to it. Damn, what's going on in Portland, Oregon? Graffitiing all over the place. That has got to stop. This is America. Anyways, go ahead. Intro.
You're Chad Wolf, and you're about to throw me into the back of a Dodge Caravan. Dodge Caravan. It's funny and also really, really scary. So these sort of unidentified troops have been sent into Portland to arrest people without any kind of... You remember that thing from law school, Miranda? Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not doing that. And they're putting them in the back of rental cars and basically disappearing these people.
We've talked about like stuff that's going on at the border. Like, we'll find out years from now, like stuff that will be like, just like blood curdling. But now they're just like, you know what? All that really sneaky stuff that we do on the border that's really horrendous. Why not just do it all over the place? Like, it's working well. I mean, we can disappear Mexicans and Guatemalans and Hondurans. You know, we can disappear Americans too. I mean, they've been practicing.
Right. There's been this sort of looming question in the back of everyone's mind, which is like, if the election is illegitimate or he says he didn't lose when he did, what is law enforcement going to do? Is there some branch of law enforcement or the military that's going to be willing to like just go out and disappear people? And I guess the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
I mean, I don't know if it's funny. It's to see them getting out of like minivans, you know, it is.
That part's funny. I mean,
it's not very intimidating. I mean, but I don't understand if you're walking down the street and armed people come out who are dressed like a militia, who they have no identifying thing on them, and they're grabbing people and throwing them in the minivan. How do you know that's legitimate? How do you know you're just not being kidnapped?
Oh, well, you are being kidnapped.
Well, I mean,
I think
under the color of law, which is a new AG decision that we should talk about, not this week.
Right.
But it is actually kind of a parallel there, this BIA decision that had these like rogue officers who were like kidnapping and torturing people. And the BIA said, they're just rogue officers. We don't even know if they're doing it under the color of law. And the AG actually came out with a decision that said, no, they're definitely under the color of law. It just kind of brings us back to that. Maybe the AG was signaling something saying like, all these rogue agents, yeah, they're one of us. I know. It's an odd time. It's a really odd time.
Yeah.
Horrifying.
I think when I'm kidnapped and being driven off to the camp, I do think I will find some humor in the fact that I'm in like an old Ford Aerostar.
It's like, there would be Cheerios on like on the floor.
Just greasy hand smears and stickers on the windows and stuff.
Do they have like that little family, those little stick families in the back of them? Do they have one with like a guy like kind of like bound up with like a hood over his head, like lying down? Is that going to be a new one you can do?
The dad is like a fat guy in body armor, and then
we're not talking about any of this on the show, by the way. Worst introduction ever.
I know. Okay, so first of all, we should clarify there's nothing funny about creeping fascism. This is definitely like a trial balloon. All this stuff is trial balloony, right? The immigration bans, detaining kids and MPP and sending in shock troops to Portland to just like literally clear the streets of whoever. They're just trying to see what they can do, and hopefully we can stop it before they take the next step. But anyhow, yeah, we have a really good show today, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking to Robin Thurston from Democracy Forward, who is an organization, she'll explain, that has kind of committed themselves to suing the government, holding the administration to account for things that might not be as obvious as others, like travel bans, the DACA things that might go under the radar. And she's going to talk about kind of a unique situation with U visas and T visas, a big change that the administration made quietly about a year ago that has really done damage to discrete parts of these programs. And I think it's really important that there are people that are focusing not necessarily on the bigger glamorous things, but going for all the ways that the government is acting unlawfully. And It's a really interesting discussion for lawyers who are, sometimes feel powerless, like everything is wrong. Imagine someone who's practicing immigration law from 2014 and just like transporting them to today. It is unrecognizable. It really is.
Yeah.
And people like Robin Thurston and Democracy Forward are attacking some of these things because you can't get to all of them. You really can't. So she's really smart, and it's a really good conversation.
Yeah, just to echo that. Echo. No, but that was a real bad. That was like a Matthew joke almost.
Yeah, well, you can take that one out.
Matthew and I are private practitioners. We have our little businesses. And so I'm looking at my desk right now. I have like so much to do, just stacks and stacks. And so when we see something that's like, some change like this, it's really hard. I mean, we don't have the knowledge or the skill or the time to let's sue the federal government and the executive branch. And
yeah, let's emphasize we don't have the skill.
The skill, that's the main thing. It's not so much that we're busy, actually.
Yeah, actually, I have really not much going on.
Oh, man. It's awesome to know that we have allies and people putting in the time and the work that needs to be put in. So,
and they're representing seafood workers in New Orleans and some of the essential workers that are helping us get through this time period of COVID. And I know Stephen works a lot with farm workers. I work with a lot of farm workers here in New Jersey, in restaurant workers. And hopefully one day the government will recognize the importance that these people are making in their lives. So, thank you to Robin and Democracy Forward for taking up the cause of these people.
Right. And we also talk about the coming executive order bill, which is going to be awesome. It's going to be huge. Pretty cool.
The bill, it's an executive order bill. It's a bill of executive orders that is going to give and take away DACA. See, it's going to give DACA, then it's going to take it away because they're not going to need it because they have citizenship. I think that's what he's getting at. You'll understand later on.
There's a chance that Trump thinks Bill is like a guy named Bill. Like, what's the dumbest possible thing he could believe in? It's like, it's possible. Matthew, let's get to the show. And
I'm going to go put on my mask and we're going to do the show.
For the folks who don't know you, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I'm Robin Thurston. I'm a senior counsel at Democracy Forward. Democracy Forward is a nonprofit legal organization that focuses on executive branch illegality, and in particular, bringing litigation against the Trump administration about issues that might not otherwise be covered by existing progressive litigation groups. And so we try to focus on the issues that fly more under the radar, or maybe where the legal theory is a little more aggressive. But fortunately for us, unfortunately for the world, the administration's done a lot of illegal things. So there's more than enough work to go around. And we've been busy suing them.
Yeah, we were saying last week how it's just impossible to keep up with everything, all the bad things that are happening. It's really easy to keep up with the good things, right? Like,
which ones?
Yeah, exactly. Like, we could do a show every day focused on one new bad thing that they've done.
Absolutely.
And I mean, we couldn't do the show because like we're not good enough to do that, but someone could.
Somebody
And
could.
so it's good to see people out there who maybe are not attacking the most obvious.
Right.
So I'm really interested to hear what you guys are doing.
Robin, do you have a favorite bad thing?
Well,
This has been something in our house where it's like, well, there's no good news. So like, what's your favorite least bad news? I don't know.
yeah, I think the ones that I find particularly fascinating are the ones that really combine their mean-spiritedness, their malevolence with their just straight up incompetence in government. We see a lot of that.
Right.
One that I'm particularly interested in, which we just filed a lawsuit on, is one that I think you all know about a little bit, a change at the Department of Labor that makes it harder for immigrant workers who want to help American law enforcement prosecute labor crimes. It makes it harder for them to do so. And in so doing, doesn't protect those immigrants and also makes all American workers less safe because it's harder for the Department of Labor to detect and investigate those crimes. And all at the same time that the administration is touting its supposed support of human trafficking victims, it's actually making under the radar changes to make it harder for victims to actually seek protections.
Right. So in the spirit of death by 1,000 cuts, we should point out that these changes happened a year ago. And I don't know, Matthew, had you heard about this? I had no idea.
No. I mean, I don't
read.
Yes, I'm interested to hear about the U visas through like, this type of U visa. I mean, I'm kind of stuck with the old, gun in the face U visa cases that are even now, even those are getting harder.
Yeah. So let's step back for a second. The U visa is a visa for victims of crimes who are helpful in investigating or detecting the crime. There's certain crimes that qualify. They have to be, pretty serious. And I think a lot of practitioners don't really know that much about the types of crimes in the labor context you could be a victim of and qualify for the U visa. So why don't you give us a little background on that?
In the labor context particularly? Yeah, I'd be happy to. So as you mentioned, U visas generally provide immigration protections for immigrants who've suffered serious crimes. In the labor context, that means crimes like trafficking, involuntary servitude, forced labor. So basically situations where you have immigrant workers in the United States who are being criminally mistreated by their employers. And that's a particularly vulnerable group of people because in some cases they're undocumented and so have significant and reasonable fear of any interaction with law enforcement, especially during this administration. Or if they have guest worker visas, their legal status to be in the country is dependent on their employer's continued goodwill, which creates a huge barrier for reporting and investigating the labor crimes against them. The idea of the U visa program is that these immigrants, if they're willing to work with law enforcement, which includes the Department of Labor, that they can obtain temporary protection so that their immigration status is no longer dependent on remaining in the good graces of their employer. And the Department of Labor has been a great resource for these workers, in part because the process that it had in place up until a year ago was transparent, was focused on worker safety, and was disconnected from, say, the county sheriff's office, which the workers were reasonably afraid of interacting with.
Right. So the first step in getting a U visa is to have law enforcement or a certifying agency sign this form saying, yes, this person was a victim and yes, they were helpful. And like what Matthew was saying, I think most immigration lawyers are used to going to the police or a prosecutor to ask for this certification. But what you're saying is in these certain contexts, the Department of Labor can be that certifying agency saying, they came to us, they brought information, they were helpful to us in detecting these labor abuses.
Exactly. The Wage and Hour Division of the Department of Labor has responsibility for investigating these kinds of labor abuses. It really has expertise in doing so. And it ran a robust program in the past to do that.
Right. So I've done a couple of these, and I've always found the folks at the Department of Labor to be really great. They reach out, they interview the client. They, like you said, there's a huge difference between calling 911 and working with the police and the Department of Labor. So up until now, for me, it's always been a positive experience. But talk about what specifically changed a year ago under this administration to make that harder.
Sure. A year ago, the head of the Wage and Hour Division issued a bulletin that changed how the career staff in the regional offices of the Wage and Hour Division could issue the certifications. And what it now requires is that the career staff immediately refer the certification request. That's the request by the immigrant worker for a certification that they had been helpful as part of the U visa application, that immediately be referred to what they call criminal law enforcement, so which would typically mean like the county sheriff's office, and that the Department of Labor couldn't make its own decision on whether to certify until that local criminal law enforcement has had an opportunity to review the alleged crime and to make its own determination on whether certification is appropriate. And that's really problematic because, as I mentioned before, there are some local law enforcement offices that are actively hostile to immigrants. And so may, upon learning of the request for certification, let the employer know that a group of immigrants is seeking protections. Or even if they're not actively hostile, it may just be a law enforcement office without a lot of familiarity with these labor crimes. They're not run-of-the-mill crimes that, a city police force deals with. And so it may not have the expertise to determine that a crime has occurred. As a result, it makes the immigrants less safe because there's a potential for reporting to the employer and just a delay in processing the certifications.
Yeah, the lack of familiarity is what strikes me. I mean, not to disparage, I love all sheriffs and police. So
no, I love all of them. I actually really only love the ones that listen to the show.
Right. That's true.
That's fair criteria.
But it just doesn't seem like something that the sheriff or the local law enforcement would even know what to do with. I mean, that's what the Department of Labor is kind of for, right?
Exactly. I mean, the Department of Labor has a longstanding expertise in enforcing these very particular workplace requirements. And it's not something that local law enforcement typically enforces. And so even if the local law enforcement agency intends to do so, it's just not equipped, doesn't have the expertise to make a determination. And the referral is really unnecessary because there's no reason to think that the Department of Labor's prior activities under this program were anything but entirely productive. It was a robust, effective program that immigrant workers and their advocates relied on. And there's no reason to dismantle it in the way that the administration has.
Well, if I could ask a question. So someone makes a complaint, right, or asks for certification to the Department of Labor. What would happen to the employer after that? Because maybe the justification is that we want to get local law enforcement involved so they can actually take action against the employer.
Sure. No, that's a reasonable question. I think the really key issue is the timing.
By the way, when someone says that's a reasonable question, you know they're about to just completely destroy your question. But go ahead. I don't know how this works, but please.
I mean, the Department of Labor would typically conduct, once it detects one of these potential crimes, possibly as a result of an immigrant reporting it would then conduct an investigation. And if it substantiates the crime, it has its own ability to do things like require back pay, to issue civil monetary penalties, and in some circumstances refer for criminal enforcement. But these are federal crimes, and so it's not the sort of thing that the local police would typically be involved in. And what's really important is that the immigrant obtain the certification and then be on the path to receiving a U visa, and as a result have their immigration status separated from the employer's continued employment of them in order to stay basically safe while they're in the country waiting for the resolution of the investigation.
So long ago, when I was in law school, I worked for an organization called Friends of Farm Workers. And part of it was to go to these far off farms in rural Pennsylvania and talk to workers. And we went to one mushroom farm that is probably 2 hours away from any type of civilization. And while we were kind of getting done there were some complaints that we were looking into. Down this dusty road, we see a pickup truck, and behind it was a sheriff's car. It was the owner of the farm coming with the sheriff to run us off the land. So people understand, these sheriffs often work hand in hand with these farmers. I mean, they're friends with them. They probably grew up with them, and other types of business owners. And they're really intimidating. So, yeah, if
sounds
we
like an episode of the A-Team.
It does. Like if we had to, as Friends of Farm Workers, work through the local county sheriff's office or police department, that job could not have been done.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly the experience that our plaintiff, the New Orleans Workers Center for Racial Justice, has had in its organizing of seafood workers in Louisiana. These workers are in the country typically on guest worker visas, working in big seafood processing plants. And the owners of those plants have similarly friendly relationship with the local sheriffs. And so there's really significant and reasonable fear amongst the workers that if the sheriff learns that they're considering reporting workplace violations, that the next thing the sheriff does is let the boss at the company know, and then the workers are subject to retaliation.
Yeah, it seems like, if anything, these protections should be going the other way. We get a lot of people who, maybe they've been injured on the job and then summarily dismissed or fired or whatever. And they kind of think that maybe they fit into this thing that they've heard of, the U visa, and usually they don't. And I've always thought, like, if we were to expand part of immigration law to be more just and to include more deserving people, this would be an easy place to do it.
Yeah.
To expand labor protections. And, they're just going the other way with it.
Exactly. And what drives me crazy is, we all know that the administration's hostile to immigrants, but they claim to be supportive of, enforcing basic laws and of supporting victims of human trafficking. And this policy change makes it harder to do both.
Well, you used to be able to just drive along and turn left right into the United States. And that's how they trafficked. And now you can't do that because of the wall. So
thank goodness.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, I don't know if you know anything about this, but have you guys pursued anything on the policy change to refer denied U visas to the immigration court for removal proceedings, or to ICE, I guess, specifically?
We don't have litigation on that. I'm aware of the policy change and aware that it's hugely harmful.
Yeah.
But I don't think I can speak with more particularity.
Matthew, basically, his whole thing is that his cases don't really get approved. And so it's been a real downer.
It's been a real boom. Yeah. Well, actually, I had one guy, his U visa was denied because he disappeared and we couldn't answer an RFE for him. And they sent the NTA to our office and they put his address as our office. And it's just insane. It's like, we can't get in. We tried to get in touch with the guy. I sent a letter to the court and to DHS saying, hey, look, he's not my client. And, he doesn't live at my office. So, this isn't properly served. But yeah, it's just all these little things that they're doing it's absolutely insane.
Are you all aware of there was some reporting on this in December and January that there was a policy change to deny any U visa applications where spaces in the application were left blank? So if you didn't fill out the middle name because you didn't have one, that would be a basis for denial. There's no reason for
denying them or just rejecting. I've had them sent back.
Yeah.
I haven't had any denials based on that yet.
I've got one that's been stamped 5 times. Not real proud of it, but it's been. I don't think they're being denied, but they are being rejected. So I had one, it was rejected, I think 3 times. And it was rejected, I think a 4th time, because by that time the form had expired. So, if Yeah.
Speaking of expired forms, as of yesterday, at least, the work permit application form on the USCIS website was an expired form. Have you seen this? And
Right.
we've heard of those being rejected for being submitted on an expired form, even though there's no current form available.
Mm-hmm. They're also just not printing cards right now. I mean, this is an endless slew of nonsense. But let me just ask you, let's get a little bit weedy, I guess, for a second. Matthew and I aren't super smart, so try and dumb it down a little bit. But so the Trump administration says, you know what, let's make the certification process more complicated. Let's involve agencies that don't need to be involved. Let's, sort of undermine the whole point of the U visa itself. But what is the basis of the lawsuit?
Yeah. The Administrative Procedure Act, which sounds very weedsy, but has actually been hugely important during this administration. It's the same statute that resulted in the invalidation of the DACA rescission. And what it basically requires is that agencies can have a lot of discretion to make decisions about the policies that they want to promulgate, but they have to engage in reasoned decision making to do so. And that means that they have to consider all the relevant factors, consider and evaluate the consequences of a policy change. I mean, you would think the government would be doing this anyway, but this basic legal requirement has actually tripped up the administration in a lot of its cases because, as I said before, they're not only malevolent, they are incompetent. And so that's the basis for our challenge here. So what this policy change, if they wanted to do it, should have done is engaged in a public notice and comment procedure. You let the public know we're thinking about making this change, and you allow them to submit comments, and then the agency considers those comments and can then move forward with the change if it takes them seriously and responds to them. They didn't do that here.
Right.
That's a procedural violation that we allege in our complaint. What they also didn't do, somewhat more substantively, is consider the basis for their policy change. So in the prior program, the Department of Labor had determined that worker safety was paramount in determining when to let criminal law enforcement know about the certification request. That's a factual determination that they've ignored. And that's the kind of change that makes the policy arbitrary and capricious.
Right. It sounds a lot like the DACA case, actually, not so much about whether or not they can do something, but just that they're governing wrong.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the Department of Labor has a great deal of discretion about how it runs this program. We think the prior program was great and should have been continued, but there's no statute preventing them from changing it a little bit. But what they are required to do is just engage in basic good government in the process of doing so. And that's what they failed to do here.
Right. Wow. I'm really happy that we were able to touch bases with you and to learn about this. Again, it's crazy how many things are going on. And it is, I guess, the good news, the thing that every once in a while makes me feel a little tiny bit good for a fleeting moment is looking around and seeing the folks on our team, right? And that there's people attacking these things and working on them. So,
yeah, no, I'm delighted to speak with you and I appreciate your interest in it. And I'll say personally, working with the New Orleans Workers Center for Racial Justice, the plaintiff in this has been similarly inspiring to me. I mean, they do such important and valuable work with really marginalized members of our society who are providing an invaluable service in keeping the food chain going, and seeing them get up and do that work every day in the face of such federal hostility is really inspiring.
Are you getting hooked up with any good seafood for this? Or?
I wish.
Well, that's why I would do it.
Yeah. We were hoping to file and then have an event in person in New Orleans, which was my whole goal. But of course, COVID prevented that.
I just had to give a corn discount on a U visa adjustment case for some clients who are ready to apply for their green cards, but they haven't been working for a while. So they just got back to work. And I was like, well, so they're, telling me they don't have money. And so I said, okay, what are you doing these days? Picking corn. It's like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to get paid in corn on this one. So
well, it's the right time of year for that, at least.
Yeah. Oh, it better be good. When they bring the corn, it's, all nasty. That's not good. But anyhow, in terms of good news, there is some, we got to look for a little bit, but it looks like we're ready to make some inroads on immigration reform. And so I'm just going to play this little clip of Donald Trump, the president of the United States, being interviewed by NBC Nightly News.
To be over the next few weeks signing an immigration bill that a lot of people don't know about it. You have breaking news, but I'm signing a big immigration bill.
Is this an executive order?
I'm going to do a big executive order. I have to.
Okay, so this reminds me of like an interview or something where you don't really know what you're talking about.
No, this is like me in immigration court, like talking to the judge. And then we're going to do the 212H waiver. You mean the 212I? It's fraud, right? Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Counsel, you're going to be applying for a cancellation. He seems like very obviously qualified for that, right? Yes.
Yeah, that's what I said.
I'll have that application the next year.
Power to do it as president, and I'm going to make DACA a part of it. But we put it in, and we're probably going to then be taking it out. We're working out.
All right. Do you guys catch that?
What does that even mean?
Well, you put the DACA, it's like the hokey pokey. You put the DACA in, you take the DACA out.
Legal
Okay.
complexities right now, but I'm going to be signing a very major immigration bill as an executive order.
All right. So it's just going to be both things.
Well, Congress doesn't do anything anyway, so we
That's
will
true.
do all bills via executive order.
Might as well.
Which Supreme Court now, because of the DACA decision, has given me the power to do that. One of the aspects of the bill is going to be DACA. We're going to have a road to citizenship.
Okay, so that's as an executive order, not as a congressional
If
bill.
you look at the Supreme Court ruling, they gave the president tremendous powers when they said that you could take in this case, 700,000 or so people. So they gave powers. Based on the powers that they gave, I'm going to be doing an immigration bill. One of the aspects of the bill that you'll be very happy with and that a lot of people will be, including me and a lot of Republicans, by the way, will be DACA. We'll give them a road to citizenship.
All right. So
This guy analyzes Supreme Court decisions as well as the BIA. So,
now, admittedly, I didn't read the Supreme Court DACA decision. I'm too busy. But I will definitely read it now that I know that they afforded him the power to legislate. That's amazing. I hadn't heard that.
it seemed like it was the opposite of the arguments that the government was putting forward. Seems like.
I want to give a shout out to the press for just really, first of all, delivering us Trump in some ways, and then just holding his hand through this whole process. I mean, how about what are you talking about? Or that doesn't make sense. Just no. Well, but what's interesting about that? So remember earlier when I was struggling to find the clip?
Yeah, we
Remember
do. Everyone does, yeah.
Both clips that I found cut him off right after he said, we're going to do DACA. And then they cut back to the anchor who said, it was a shift in tone.
Yeah, well, this is Telemundo, and any immigration attorney that works with the Spanish-speaking population knows that we get tons of phone calls every week about something that they heard on Telemundo or Univision.
Mm-hmm.
I always kind of advise my clients, like, don't listen to them, please. And this is why, because people are going to think that DACA is now going to be a thing that's going to lead to citizenship. But
yeah, Robin, do you have any predictions on the executive order bill?
I predict that the president's trying to do something to salvage his plummeting poll numbers, and he knows that people support DACA, so he's trying to wave his hands around and distract. But
right.
Beyond that, I can't predict anything.
Well, Matthew is just excited that he's promised to fix the 12 flush problem, because when the president says people are flushing the toilet 12 times because there's not enough water, really resonates with Matthew.
It's only 10 for me, but we got a lot of rain here recently, so that's probably why.
All right. Well, Robin Thurston, you're with Democracy Forward.
That's right.
Are there turf wars with Democracy Now?
No, for the first year or so that we existed, we often got described as Democracy Now! In the press. But, they do great work, so that's cool.
Right.
We now typically are described as Democracy Forward.
I see. Do you guys take donations? How can people find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so we have a great website, democracyforward.org, that describes our cases. And there's an option to donate, which we would appreciate. And yeah, we'd love to have your listeners check it out. There's a lot of interesting immigration stuff on there and a lot of other administrative challenges.
Oh, great. We will for sure do that. Thanks for coming on. And you guys try to do something fun this weekend at home.
Likewise. Good luck.
Thank you, Robin.
Robin, thank you.